Non-factual clauses. We have now considered four kinds of clauses: full statement, full question, infinitive, and gerund. The next kind of clause resembles the full statement, but actually is different. For example, the sentences like 35A, 35B, and 35C. I insist that Ronald works very hard. I insist that Ronald work very hard. I insist that Ronald should work very hard. 35A is different from 35B and 35C, but 35B and 35C are quite alike in what they say. In 35A, the subject I insists that a certain fact is true. In the other two sentences, the embedded clause tells what the subject maintains ought to be a fact. In 35A, the embedded clause contains information that is presented as true at the time of utterance. In the other two sentences, the embedded clause states what someone wants to be true at a later time, whether true at the time or not. Some speakers of English prefer the construction with should. Some prefer the construction without should, but perhaps use it only in formal communication. The full clause in 35A is a factual clause, and we give the name non-factual clause to the embedded clause of 35B and 35C with or without should, as long as the subject of the clause names one person other than I or you. There is a difference between the factual clause of 35A and the non-factual clause of 35B. The presence or absence of the ending "s" with I, you, or a plural subject, this distinction is lost. I insist that they work very hard is ambiguous. Of course, there is a clear distinction between factual clause and non-factual clause if should is used for the latter, but not all speakers make this distinction. The sixth point of this lecture is about verbal nouns. You are familiar with gerund clauses as in this sentence: we watched Mark winning the race. Here, winning is gerund. If we compare sentence 38 with sentence 39, we applauded Mark's winning of the race. The second sentence contains a verbal noun formed like the gerund by adding ing. The difference between gerund and verbal noun is in the kind of construction they appear in. The subject of the verbal noun is typically possessive, and the object of the verbal noun is preceded by of. All verbs form a gerund by adding ing. Common verbs of Old English origin, like win, form a verbal noun in the same way, so that the only difference is in the syntactic construction. In the French, Latin, Greek part of our vocabulary, however, verbal nouns are formed in a number of different ways, but are always distinct from gerunds. For example, discovery, explanation, improvement, response versus discovering, explaining, improving, and responding. The next group of sentences contains clauses in subject and object positions, and the clauses contain verbal nouns. As the examples show, when the verb requires a preposition before a following object, the verbal noun keeps the same preposition. If the verb is not followed by a preposition, the verbal noun inserts of. The other point is, if the verb has an overt subject, the subject becomes possessive before the verbal noun, as shown. If the verbal noun has a tacit subject, the verbal noun is preceded by the. For example, in sentence 44, I enjoyed the conversation mean somebody conversed. The employment of a large labor force is beneficial to any local economy means somebody employs a large labor force. And in sentence 46, the president will soon announce the selection of a new cabinet officer, which means somebody will select. Comparing types of clauses. Different kinds of clauses can present different kinds of meanings, but this is obvious only when the same predicate can be accompanied by different kinds of clauses. The verb agree, for example, can be followed by an infinitive clause and a full clause. For example, in sentence 47a, we agree to meet again the next day. Sentence 47b, we agreed that we would meet again the next day. And sentence 47c, we agreed that prices are too high nowadays. The verb agree followed by an infinitive clause indicates a commitment on the part of the subject to do something. 47a is about our commitment to meet the next day. That is really all that can be expressed by the infinitive clause after agree. A full clause can express all kinds of facts and possible facts, including commitments on the part of the subject. There is not much difference between 47a and 47b. However, 47c is not about a commitment, but about knowledge or a belief that we hold in common. Some other verbs that can take a full clause or an infinitive clause are decide, expect, hope, and resolve. If we see in this slide, sentence 48a, we convinced Herman to throw away his smelly old pipe. 48b, we convinced Herman that he should throw away his smelly old pipe. And 48c, we convinced Herman that he did not know what he was talking about. Unlike agree, convince is followed by an infinitive clause with overt subject. We convince another person to do something. That is, we use language successfully with another person, causing him or her to do something. We can also use language successfully with somebody, causing him or her to accept the truth or validity of some statement. That is what the full clause expresses, like 48b and 48c. Worth noting that 48a implies that Herman threw away his pipe, but 48b goes only as far as his accepting that this is the right action. The verb remind is syntactically like convince. If you replace convinced with reminded in 48a to c, you will find that the infinitive clause and full statement clause have the same senses, the same relation to each other. Of course, remind is semantically different from convince, though it shares the sense of using language successfully with another person. Gerund clause and full clause. The verb admit as used here indicates a use of language, generally in response to someone's question or accusation. If we see sentence 49a, 49b and 49c, admit plus an infinitive clause denotes the use of language about an action performed by the subject. The full clause can express the same action, like 49b is essentially the same as 49a, but it can express any putative fact as in 49c. Some similar verbs are confess, consider, deny, imagine, regret, and report. Infinitive and gerund clauses. In sentence 50a, the museum would not allow us to photograph the exhibit, and in 50b, the museum would not allow photographing the exhibit. With allow and the verbs listed below, the infinitive is used when there is an overt subject for the verb in the included clause. Here, photograph. There must be a subject. It has to be stated who is or is not allowed to photograph. The gerund clause is used to avoid mentioning the specific person or persons allowed or not allowed to photograph the exhibit. The statement applies to all people.